Hey, welcome back. So this is the process of photosynthesis 9.3. This is the last section in the chapter. So this is a little bit of a review. So photosynthesis involves two primary sets of reactions. We talked about those two reactions last time. We have the light dependent and light independent reactions. You should understand what goes into and comes out of, right? The products and reactants of those two reactions. So for example, if I asked you what is the product of the light dependent reaction, you should be able to tell me that it is O2. Okay. You should also understand that what is converted in the process, right? So know that ADP and NADP plus are converted into energy carriers, ATP and NADPH. Okay, so let's go a little deeper into the light-dependent reactions. So light-dependent reactions use energy from sunlight to produce ATP and NADPH and oxygen. So once again, we have our thylakoids, and the thylakoids contain clusters of chlorophyll and proteins known as photosystems. Remember that a stack of thylakoids is known as a granum. Okay, hopefully this is review at this point. All right, so this is what this reaction looks like, and I know it's a little bit scary, but don't panic. So there are different photosystems, right? So we have photosystem 2, photosystem 1, and then we have ATP synthase. So light-dependent reactions use the energy from sunlight to produce oxygen. They convert ADP and NADP plus into energy carriers ATP and NADPH. So let's look at that first equation on the upper right here. The result of the light-dependent reaction is to convert ADP and NADP plus into ATP and NADPH, right? So we're charging up these molecules. You can see here, light is coming in, okay? This is why we say it is light-dependent. Here we have our 2H2O, and that is converted into 4 hydrogen and 2 oxygen. So there are 4 main stages of the light-dependent reactions. We have photosystem 2, we have the electron transport chain, we have photosystem 1, and then we have hydrogen ion movement and the ATP formation. So if we look at the diagram, if you look for photosystem 2, okay, you'll notice it's actually at the beginning of this chain. There we go. If we look for the electron transport chain, all right, it is all through here. And then last but not least, if we look for photosystem 1, you'll see it's right here. So you'll notice they're not necessarily in an order. Let's move on to the next slide. Oh, and then here is hydrogen ion movement and ATP formation. So photosystem 2 absorbs light energy and produces high energy electrons, and this helps to split the water molecules and releases the hydrogen ions and oxygen. So light energy absorbed by electrons in the pigments increase the electron's energy level, and the high energy electrons are passed on to the electron transport chain. You'll also sometimes see the electron transport chain abbreviated as the ETC. All right, it's just blowing this up a little bit. So as light continues to shine, more and more high energy electrons are passed to the electron transport chain, and the thylakoid membrane contains a system that provides new electrons to chlorophyll to replace ones that it has lost. So as plants remove electrons from water, oxygen is left behind and it's released into the air. So if you notice, oxygen in this case, O2, is it produced intentionally by plants, or is it a just byproduct, right? In this case, oxygen is a byproduct, which makes it even more amazing that that is what humans and animals and basically every living thing on Earth needs to live, is this byproduct that plants produce in the process of breaking down water to get energy to make themselves food. All right, the next step is the electron transport chain. So this is a series of electron carrier proteins, and they shuttle high energy electrons during ATP generating reactions. So when we look at this, you may wonder, what happens to the electrons as they move down the electron transport chain, right? So energy from the electron is used by the proteins in the chain to pump hydrogen ions from the stroma into the thylakoid space. So here you see those hydrogen ions. The energy from these electrons is being used to pump these hydrogen ions into the stroma. And all of this is just preparation. You'll see in a minute here. So here we see it's pumping against the gradient, right? Because there's less hydrogen ions on the outside or in the stroma than there are inside the thylakoid space. All right, and then those electrons move on to photosystem 1. Now, photosystem 1 is incredibly important because this is where two things happen. Electrons are re-energized, and then the second electron transport chain transfers electrons to NADP+, and that produces that NADPH, right, that we need for those light-independent reactions. All right, so if you see here, that's going to produce 2 NADPH, and those NADPH go to the light-independent reactions. And then the last step is hydrogen ion movement, which powers ATP formation. So we've been pumping all these hydrogen ions into the thylakoid space, and this has created a difference in both charge and hydrogen ion concentration across the membrane. And that's what provides that energy to make ATP, which, if you remember, is that second very important molecule that we're using, right, to help transfer energy. Here we go. So here is ATP synthase. We've talked about how things that are called synthase are just that they make something, right? So they synthesize something. So ATP synthase, it synthesizes ATP, or it makes ATP. So it's going to take an ADP and a free-floating phosphate, and it's going to use the energy created by this gradient to essentially attach this phosphate and charge it up and create that ATP. There we go. So as those hydrogen ions pass through the ATP synthase, it actually causes the molecule to rotate, and the energy that's produced is what's used to convert the ADP to ATP. So if you look here, you can see that that's highlighting the rotation, and what is produced is ATP. Okay, so here is the light-dependent reaction summary. So we've gone over all the different steps. We go from photosystem 1, where it's breaking down water into 4 hydrogen ions and 2 oxygens. We have the electron transport carrier, where we're pumping these hydrogen ions into the thylakoid space. Then we have photosystem 2, where the NADPH is created, and then last but not least, ATP synthase, which converts ADP and a phosphate into ATP. So now let's move to the light-independent reactions. So ATP and NADPH are used to synthesize high-energy sugars. So if you look here, you can see that 6 ATP are used, okay, and 6 ADP are released. Same here. 12 ATP, 12 ADP released. 12 NADPH are used, 12 NADP plus are released. So the light-independent reactions, this is commonly referred to as the Calvin cycle. Now, if you go to college and take biology in the college level, they'll probably make you memorize all the steps in the Calvin cycle, but I am not going to be doing that. So we're just going to kind of go over an overview. But when you look at the Calvin cycle, it should hopefully make sense by the end of this. And remember that the whole point is to make these high-energy sugars. All right, so here are those high-energy sugars and other compounds. All right, so carbon dioxide enters the cycle. So if you look up here, you can see CO2 is coming in. This is in the stroma, okay? So 6 carbon dioxide molecules from the atmosphere combine with 6 5-carbon molecules. And this produces 12 3-carbon compounds. So 6 and 6 produces 12, okay? And here's that blown up a little bit. All right, and you can see these 6 carbon compounds are a byproduct, right? So they're being recycled over and over and over again. All right, so energy from ATP and high energy electrons from NADPH are used to convert the 3-carbon molecules to higher energy forms. Okay, and that is where we get these sugars and other compounds. Now, the remaining 10 3-carbon molecules, they're converted back into 6 5-carbon molecules. And you can see that here. And the energy is that's used to do this comes from these 6 ATP. So total, how many ATP are we using? It's about 18 and 12 NADPH. All right, and you can see it's a cycle, it keeps going back around and around again. So 6 molecules of carbon dioxide are used to produce a single 6-carbon sugar molecule using energy supplied by compounds produced in light-dependent reactions. That is the main thing you need to know, right? 6 molecules of CO2 are used to produce a single 6-carbon sugar molecule, and the energy comes from the light-dependent reactions. All right, so factors affecting photosynthesis. So there are different things that can affect the speed and rate of photosynthesis, or whether it's happening at all. So things like temperature, light intensity, availability of water, all of those things can affect photosynthesis. So some plants have adapted to extremely bright, hot conditions, and plants adapt to many different conditions, right? An example of ones that have adapted to hot conditions would be C4 plants and CAM plants. So C4 plants are special because they have a very specialized chemical pathway that allows them to capture very low levels of carbon dioxide and pass it on to the Calvin cycle. So this allows photosynthesis to keep working under intense light and high temperatures, but it requires extra energy in the form of ATP to function. So C4 organisms include like crop plants like corn, sugarcane, sorghum, if you've ever heard of that. So CAM plants, CAM refers to Crassulian acid metabolism. So this is a specific family of plants, and they are able to admit air into their leaves only at night. So in the cool night, carbon dioxide is combined with existing molecules to produce organic acids, which trap the carbon in the leaves. During the daytime, when the leaves are tightly sealed to produce the loss of water, the compounds then release the carbon dioxide, which enables carbohydrate production. So CAM plants would be things like cacti, pineapple is another CAM plant, things like that, things that live in really hot, dry environments. So I hope all of this was helpful. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Just like the last two, there will be a question following this video. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I am here to help. Thank you. Have a wonderful week.